Okay, so I asked which video you guys wanted me to make next for the full power upgrades, and all of y'all delivered almost unanimously on wanting me to talk about my Savra Queen of the Golgari build. Apparently, I'm not the only one that simps for the GOLGARI DOMMY mana. So, let's go ahead and talk about what this deck is, what she is trying to do, and why we are running her. So, we are running Savra very, very simply because she is just a copy of Grave Pact. That's the reason we're running her. We are running her because Grave Pact is a really cool and oppressive Magic the Gathering card, and it turns out that Savra is just Grave Pact, but with boobies, okay? It's Grave Pact with boobies. That's why we're running it. That's why we like her. And her fit is just fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to stop simping for her. Let's talk about her ability. When you sacrifice a black creature, you can pay 2 life, and everybody has to sacrifice a creature with you. When you sack a green creature, you gain 2 life. Now, the reason her effect is this way is because when the Peruns, or at least the characters who were the current leaders of the guild in Ravnica when the original set came out, were conceived, the idea was to give them all one effect that went with one of their colors and one effect that went with one of their other colors. Green being a growth and life theme, and black being a sacrifice and paying life theme with Savra. This is one of the reasons why when you look at cards like Momer Vig, he says, hey, when you play a blue card, when you play a blue card, draw a card. When you play a green card, tutor a creature. They're all kind of built with this, let's get something from one color and something from another color philosophy. And it makes her ridiculously strong. Now, I also want to talk about kind of why I personally play this commander, and it's because of a personal journey that I went through. So, I bought the precon for the Strixhaven Golgari set, right? Like, I really, really wanted this precon to be good, and it was. It really, really was. The only problem with this particular precon, the Witherbloom precon, and I'll go ahead and bring it up real quick so you guys can see it. The Witherbloom... Sorry, having issues right now. But the Witherbloom precon, as good as it was, I had never played an Aristocrats deck, so I had no idea how to play this thing. It was also an Aristocrats deck that was running 23 creatures. It was running lower than the suggested amount of creatures in it to begin with, which is just really, really difficult to justify playing Aristocrats with a low creature count. So I didn't know what I was doing with it. I knew I didn't want to play Willow Dusk, but I did know that there was a commander that caught my eye, and she's going to be the subject of a couple of videos later. That commander was Dina Soulsteeper. I immediately fell in love with this effect, this gain life, every opponent loses a life effect, and I wanted to build a deck around it. The problem is, again, I didn't know how to play Aristocrats at the time. So I tried putting in a whole bunch of like landfall triggers that said, hey, when you play a land, gain a life. And that way I could have Dina burn everybody as I was doing it. I wanted to play it as a straight burn deck. The problem is, when you play that kind of deck, it's very, very difficult to actually be seen as a threat on the board that can't just be easily dealt with. So you end up kind of flying under the radar for a while, and then you just die because you didn't get to do anything or affect the game very much. So I wanted a big, explosive commander to take her place, which led me to the actual leader of the Witherbloom campus, Beladros Witherbloom. Now, I really wanted this one to work because I fucking love dragons, and a commander that says, hey, at the beginning of every upkeep, you can do 1/1 green pest things, and also pay 10 life, untap all the lands you control. She felt perfect for building a deck around. And I already knew how to play Green Rant because I was playing AC, and I was already playing the deck as a landfall deck, kind of. So this was a perfect card to take Dina's place. And then I learned that focusing every single turn in the first 4 turns of the game on trying to get your commander out, only for it to die to removal as soon as it comes out, feels genuinely awful. So, despite many games of me trying to make Beladros Witherbloom work, I just couldn't. And a friend of mine said, you know, the turns where you got your commander out weren't the turns I was worried about you. The turns where you had this on the board were the turns I was worried about you, because when you had this card on the board, Savra, that's when you were a threat. You didn't do anything the turns you got your commander out, because we just killed her on sight. But it was much harder to deal with you when you were making us sack all of our shit. Which led me to swap the commander out for Savra, and because Savra had a lower mana cost than Belladros, the acceleration I had already put in the deck to get Belladros out just kind of worked out really well, and I tweaked the deck a ton since then. This is probably one of my 3 most tweaked decks that I've ever messed with, where I'm constantly looking at it, constantly revising it, constantly fixing it up. So that led me to Savra. And then, because I was already a fan of the Ravnica story, I already knew her lore, because I own the physical Ravnica books from back then. It's my main Ravnica book, the one with Argus Kos on the front, is sitting right next to my N64, all things considered. So this is a very near and dear card to my heart from a lore perspective, and my personal journey of discovering the Aristocrats' style of play through a very just rough and tumble way of pushing through getting this commander to work. It just kind of worked out for me really, really well. So let's go ahead and get into the deck list now that I've done that preamble, and let's go ahead and talk our ramp package. How are we going to be getting this beautiful bitch on the board and making everybody suffer? Let's begin with Arcane Signet. And as with any of the decks that are like my personal physical builds, I will put the cards that are either in my physical deck or the printings that I am looking for that physical deck. This list serves as both the list itself for me and also for the cards that I am looking to pick up that I do not currently have. So this is the Arcane Signet I would prefer to have in it because it's perfect for the type of deck that it is. But tap it, get a mana in any mana of any color in your commander's color identity. I can't speak. And then we have Birds of Paradise for 1 mana, Delighted Halfling for 1 mana that makes our commander uncounterable, which is super helpful. Farseek, which will go into our deck and grab any non-forest card, which is good because we like getting things that are dual types. Gala Greeters, which will make treasure tokens every time we spawn a token, or we can get 2 life when we do that. We can also put 1/1 counters on the Gala Greeters, but you're never doing that. Either gain the life or get the treasure token. Either one of those will work out for you in the end. Nature's Lore will get a forest out of our deck for 2 mana. Pitiless Plunderer, whenever a creature we control dies, make a treasure token. This works really well with our sack outlets. Speaking of sack guys, Sakura Tribe Elder, Steve, he is here. Steve can sack himself to get any basic land out of your deck onto the battlefield. Wood Elves can get any forest from your deck onto the battlefield untapped. 3 Visits will get any forest from your deck onto the battlefield untapped. And then, of course, Soul Ring to add 2 mana to your pile. So, ramp is very important for every deck we have, but our deck actually runs at a very, very low mana curve, so we don't have to focus on it too much, but we do want to be able to see every card in our deck every game if we can help it. So let's go to the draw engine itself. And the draw engine we have is a 9-card engine. Most of them are repeatable, which makes them super strong, but we can start with Deadly Dispute. We can sack any artifact or creature we have to draw 2 cards and make a treasure token, which, you know, treasure tokens are always useful. Cards that can sacrifice are always useful. We love cards like this. Death Reap Ritual at the beginning of each end step. If any creature died this turn, draw a card. Really easy to have that happen for us. Growing Rites of Itlimoc. When it ETBs, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Grab a creature, of which we have 29. Put it in your hand. And then, at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, flip it into Itlimoc Cradle of the Sun, which is just a Gaia's Cradle that is on the backside of a creature draw spell. Then we have Sylvan Library. At the beginning of your draw step, if you draw, you can draw 2 additional cards, and then you can put up to 2 of them onto your deck. We'll choose 2 cards in your hand, draw on this turn. For each of those cards, pay 4 life, or put the card on top of your library. So you can either keep the cards you chose, or put any number of them on the top. We have a lot of life gain in this deck, so oftentimes we're just going to keep the cards off of Sylvan Library. Skull Clamp, it can just attach to a creature, kill it, and then draw us 2 cards. Very easy to do with 1/1 tokens this deck spawns. Morbid Opportunist, anytime 1 or more other creatures dies, draw a card once per turn. Moldavine Reclamation, if a creature dies under our control, we gain a life and draw a card. Bolas's Citadel, This is a secondary win con, and I treat it as draw because, let's be honest, it is basically just giving you a ton of free cards. You can look at the top card of your library at any point. You can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library, and you pay life for it instead of casting it for its mana cost. And then Tenacious Underdog. This card's super unique in the deck. So, it's got a blitz cost of paying 4 mana and 2 life. You can play it from the graveyard. When it dies, it draws you a card, and it dies at the end of the turn because of the Blitz effect. Blitz says you can play the card, give it haste, and then it dies at the end of the turn, drawing you a card. Now, the thing with Tenacious Underdog is he is colored black. So Savra, Queen of the Golgari, sees him and just goes, "Oh, you're a removal spell. Thanks, buddy. Thank you for dying." He does a ton of work in our deck, and there's lots of times where you'll be on the back foot and just have your commander out and your grave, no cards in hand, you're spent, and you're just like, huh, I can draw 1 card and kill 3 creatures with this. That's perfectly fine. That's worth 4 life. I can do that. And since we are losing cards all the time in this deck, we also have a 9-card reanimation and recursion package, starting with Agadeem's Awakening, one of my favorite MDFCs. Of course, these are the lands that are lands on one side and spells on the other. If you can pack these in your deck, please do so. They are basically free slots. Return from your card to the battlefield any number of creature cards that have different converted mana costs, X or less. Oftentimes, we're going to do X of 4 or 5, and just dump most of the things in our graveyard onto the battlefield. We're going to grab a 1 cost, a 2 cost, a 3 cost, 4 cost, and a 5 cost. Sometimes you can have the mana to dump, 10 mana into this and get Beledrose Witherbloom off of it as well, but oftentimes you're just getting a cluster of creatures, usually some parts of your Aristocrat package, to go to town with. Then, one of my favorite reanimation spells of all time, Altar of Baal. Tap it, pay 3, exile a creature we control, usually a token, and animate anything from your graveyard at sorcery speed. Just recurable reanimation is great. Speaking of which, another MDFC, Journey to Eternity. Enchant a creature we control. It's basically a Kaya's Ghost form. If the creature dies, put it right back on our battlefield. Usually we're going to put this on a creature, sacrifice it automatically with something, and then it flips into Atzlal, the Cave of Eternity, which is a land that lets us reanimate cards from our graveyard, and unlike some other cards, it doesn't give finality counters because it's older than that mechanic. So for 5 mana, tap it, return any creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can do this at instant speed, so this is a wonderful thing to do. Imagine your opponent summons their Voltron commander, they're about to give it haste, they're about to punch you, and you're like, no, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to reanimate a Fleshbag Marauder, and you are going to choke on a chode. It's a wonderful card, and more people should be running it. Then we have Malaku Rebirth, another reanimation spell that is attached to a land on the other side. Choose a creature. You lose 2 life. Until end of turn, that creature gains. When this creature dies, reanimate it. Speaking of reanimation, we have Reanimate. 1 mana card, reanimate a creature, and then lose life equal to its mana value. Then we have Balaged Recovery, another MDFC that can put any card from your graveyard to your hand. Just a fantastic card. Rise of the Witch King makes everybody sack a creature, which of course can trigger our commander, and then that will make them sack creatures again. And if we sacrifice a creature this way, we can return any permanent from our graveyard to the battlefield. This is a way to reanimate something really derpy, like a Bolus's Citadel. This is fantastic. Why is this card only 19 cents? This card is great. Finally, probably the most quirky reanimate spell in the deck is Call of the Death Dweller. Return up to 2 creatures from your graveyard with a combined mana cost of 3 or less to the battlefield. Then put a Death Touch counter on 1 and a Menace counter on either of the 2. So this card is interesting. For 3 mana, you can get back a Fleshbag Marauder, but there's a really interesting card we are trying to use this with. I'm not quite to the tokens section yet, but this is for Orcish Bowmasters. Now, we'll talk more about Orcish Bowmasters later, but the fact that Call the Death Dweller can bring Orcish Bowmasters from the graveyard to the battlefield, give it a Death Touch counter, and then anytime our opponents have the audacity to draw Magic the Gathering cards, we can then ping one of their creatures for 1 with the Bowmaster's effect, generating a token who happens to be colored black due to the Bowmaster's effect, and because of the Call the Death Dweller, that 1 damage is fatal. It is always fatal to whatever it goes and gets thrown at. We're not using Bowmasters to burn people. No, we're using Bowmasters as a Gatling gun to kill anybody's creatures, anybody's commanders who decided that they wanted to draw cards. They have to immediately get rid of the Bowmaster, or we just get to go to town on their entire boards. Everybody's board states. You can turn the blue player into the enemy of the entire game with this card, because once you play this, Bowmasters will punish everybody for having the audacity to try to get any advantage in their game. Speaking of advantage, though, we do need ways to remove our opponent's cards from their board. So let's talk about those. This is our removal and interaction section, a 14-card section beginning with Assassin's Trophy. Blow up any permanent, and then they get a basic land from their deck and put it on the battlefield. Giving you a land is fine if you lose a Planeswalker. Beast Within blows up any permanent and gives them a token. Cankerbloom can blow up an artifact, enchantment, or proliferate for us, and it's a sacrifice trigger, so of course it works with Savra's abilities. Now we have Demon's Disciple. It's a black creature that makes everybody sack a creature or Planeswalker. If Savra's out, it makes them sack twice. Hagra Mauling, another MDFC, can destroy any creature for 4 mana. But again, most importantly, it's an MDFC. It's a land when we need it to be. Then we have Grave Pact, basically a lieutenant to our commander. If our commander isn't able to come out, Grave Pact will be able to come out. Whenever a creature we control dies, every other player sacrifices a creature with us. Also, Dictative Erebos does the same thing, but at flash speed. Anytime a creature we control dies, each opponent sacks a creature. If somebody uses a one-sided board wipe on you, and you are just about to take the brunt of that, just let Dictative Erebos come in and ruin somebody's day. They decided to cast In Garruk's Wake, you decided to cast Violence. Then you have Fleshbag Marauder. When it ETBs, each player sacrifices a creature. And then this is a really funny one in the deck. Helm of Possession. You can choose not to untap it during your untap phase, because you can pay 2, tap it, sack a creature, gain control of any creature for as long as you control Helm of Possession, and then it remains tapped. So we're just going to sack a creature, and then look at our opponents and go, choose something you don't want me to have. Kill it. And then I'll take something from the spoils. Helm of Possession is a super funny card with our commander. It's basically a sack outlet that, when it's not doing its primary job, just lets us take anybody's thing. It just lets us take things from people for as long as we want. Steal commanders, or force people to sacrifice their commanders to prevent us from stealing their commanders. Helm of Possession is silly. It's quirky. It's funny. Then we have Mortality Sphere, a 4-mana card that usually only costs 2 because of its effect, destroys any non-land permanent. I adore this card. It is fantastic to be able to blow up anything that is a threat to you, no matter what type of card it is. Then we have Outland Liberator, can blow up artifacts or enchantments, and it's like Cankerbloom. It can sack itself to do it, but it also introduces Day and Nightbound mechanic, which makes you the friend of the table. It can flip into the Frenzied Fury, and it can do the same thing, sack itself, blow up an artifact or enchantment, but now whenever it attacks, we can blow up any artifact or enchantment a defending player controls. The Frenzied Fury is good enough on its own, but the fact that we can just use Outland Liberator, and it's just another Cankerbloom, is great. And everybody loves the Day and Nightbound mechanic. Everybody loves the Day and Nightbound. Anyway, moving on to Pest Infestation. XX and green to blow up to X artifacts or enchantments, and then create twice as many black and green pest tokens, which when they die, we gain a life. Because they're black and green, Savra doesn't make us lose any life, really, for using them. We just lose 2 and gain 2. And then gain 1 extra for the Pest Infestation, and then everybody sacrifices a creature because they are pests. Reclamation Sage can blow up any artifact or enchantment, and Plague Crafter can ATB and make everybody sacrifice a creature or Planeswalker, and if they can't, they discard a card. Plague Crafter type effects are brilliant in this deck because our commander basically doubles up those effects for us. But our commander also doubles up effects whenever we are forcing people to lose things via sacrifice, forcing ourselves primarily to lose things via sacrifice. So to facilitate that, we have a 6-card sack outlet section, beginning with the boy Viscera Seer. 1 mana, sack creature, scry 1. Then Priest of the Forgotten Gods. Tap her to sack 2 other creatures. Any number of people then lose 2 life and then sacrifice a creature. We then add 2 black mana and draw a card. This card does everything. It's removal, it's draw, it's ramp, it's a sack outlet. It needs to be destroyed the minute we put it on the board. Nobody needs to let us keep this thing. Then we have Ashnod's Altar, sack a creature to get 2 generic mana. Just good sack outlet, good ramp. Then we have Phyrexian Altar, another altar, sack a creature, add 1 mana of any color. It's just better Ashnod's Altar in that we get colored mana, which is more important for our deck, but it's less mana overall. A lot of times you're going to be using these 2 in tandem. Then we have one of my favorite sack outlets, Evolutionary Elap. For 2 mana, you get an enchantment that says sack a creature, reveal cards on the top of your library until you hit another creature. Immediately put that card in your hand. The rest go to the bottom of your library. So, like, sack outlets are good. Sack outlets that cost 1 mana or no mana are really good. And guaranteeing that we get a live card from the top of our deck is just, it's perfect. Then we have Ayara, First of Locthwain. We can, when she comes into the battlefield or another black creature enters the battlefield, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. Then we can sack another creature to draw a card. She is another way to draw cards outside of the dedicated draw package that the deck is running. But if we're sacrificing so many cards, we have to ask ourselves a very important question. Why are we doing that? How are we generating enough creatures to do so? Well, that's where the 8-card token generation section comes into play, beginning with the aforementioned Orcish Bow Masters. It makes a black amassed orc token whenever another player draws a card and when it ETBs. So, just anytime people are trying to dig through their decks in Magic, we get tokens. Ophiomancer, at the beginning of each upkeep, if you control no snakes, put a 1/1 black snake creature with Death Touch on the battlefield. It's a good blocker, but primarily we're going to summon it on player 2's turn, sack it before player 2's turn is over to summon another snake on player 3's turn, and again on player 4's turn until we get to our turn, player 1's, where we will have yet another snake. The best way to use Ophiomancer is to sacrifice a creature every single turn, including yours, so that the Ophiomancer will be able to generate more snakes more often. Then we have Jadar, the Ghoul Caller of Nephalia. At the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, summon a 2/2 black zombie creature token that has Decayed. I adore Jadar because Decayed in Savra means profit, because if we swing the Decayed zombie and it sacks itself because it has Decayed, we just get Savra's ability. It's just perfect. And we've got plenty of sack outlets in case people try to block to avoid that. Then we have Izani Thousand-Eyed, a 6-mana elf shaman who could be a commander of her own deck, honestly. When she enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token for every creature card that is in our graveyard. We can also pay to and sack another creature, she's her own sack outlet, to gain a life and draw a card. Honestly, I really want to make an Izani Thousand-Eyed deck that is almost all creatures. Basically, another version of the Myco Tyrant deck that I made before. I love this girl. She is amazing, and she does tons of work. And I love the new Izani, too. I just couldn't find room for her in this particular deck. Then we have Ghoulish Procession, a bit of anti-synergy with Jadar, but whenever one or more non-token creatures die on anybody's field, create a 2/2 black zombie token with Decayed once per turn. Card is amazing. It will generate tokens just because people are fighting each other in the middle of the game, and because they are Decayed zombies, we can make sure that they are gone on our turn, so Jadar can generate another zombie easily. Then we have Blightmound. Attacking pests we control, get 1/0 and have Menace, which is interesting, but the main reason we have it is anytime one of our non-token creatures die, we make a 1/1 black and green pest creature token. And because pests are green and black, they gain us life, they lose us life, and we basically go net zero, like I said with Savra, anytime that we sack a pest. Blightmound, fantastic card. I would never remove it from any version of this deck. Then we have Bitter Blossom. At the beginning of your upkeep, lose a life, make a 1/1 Black Fairy Rogue creature token. We can smack these into people, use them to block dragons, or just, they just happen to be Black Fairy Rogues, so they're the exact color that Savra wants to sacrifice. Fantastic card. And then, of course, the commander who was one of the commanders of the deck, but is basically a lieutenant here. Beladros Witherbloom at the beginning of every player's upkeep, so 4 tokens every cycle. Create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with the, when this creature dies, gain a life. We can also pay 10 life to untap all the lands we control, which makes her probably one of the best go-again cards we ever could play. She is just fantastic at her job. She makes tokens. She is functionally free because we're paying 10 life that we're getting a ton of anyway to get her effect. She's just a fantastic card. But we still have to win the game. And we haven't quite gotten to how the deck is going to win yet. So, of course, we have to get to the actual Aristocrats package of the deck. The ways we're going to burn everybody to death so we can win. Starting with Bastion of Remembrance. It makes a white human soldier token when it comes into play. Anytime a creature we control dies, every opponent loses 1 life, and we gain 1 life. Blood Artist says anytime that any creature dies, a target opponent loses 1 life, and we gain a life. Zulaport Cutthroat says whenever any creature dies on our board, each opponent will lose 1 life, and we gain 1 life. Then we have the 2 special ones, Dina Soul Steeper and Dina Soul Steeper number 2. So Dina Soul Steeper says whenever we gain life, every opponent loses 1 life. Of course, this doubles up triggers like Zulaport Cutthroat, Bastion of Remembrance, and Blood Artist, but more importantly, this synergizes with all of our pest tokens and Savra. Anytime a green creature dies, we gain 2 life, and Dina Soul Steeper will see that and give us another burn for everybody. She also can sack other creatures herself, so she is her own sack outlet. She is a fantastic card. And of course, if you want to pay 1 more mana to get a slightly worse version of her, Marauding Blight Priest is fantastic. A 3/2 creature that whenever you gain a life, every opponent loses 1 life. And I chose these specifically instead of cards like Sanguine Bond because these are much lower to the ground. And when I'm playing Aristocrats, I want most of my cards to be as low to the ground as possible unless there are simply not any other alternatives. And these happen to work way better, in my opinion, than cards like Sanguine Bond do. I also do not run the Sanguine Bond Infinite with Exquisite Blood because I'm not a big fan of 2-card infinites, and you'll also notice I'm not running tutors because I'm just not a fan of those either. I like bringing a deck that is ridiculously powerful due to the synergies that are built in it, and not because I have 10 tutors and every single way to kill you with a Thassa's Demonic Consultation combo. That's just kind of not fun. Although, I do have one surprise I win card in the deck, and his name is Gary. The Grey Merchant of Asphodel, or Gary, enters the battlefield and every opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, so however many black pips you have on the board. This can be any amount, it doesn't matter, and then you gain life equal to the life that all the opponents lost combined. Gary is a secondary win con if the Aristocrats cannot do the job themselves. He is fucking amazing. But aside from looping Gary with reanimation cards, we have another way to win the game. And that starts us out with our 3-card board wipe section, beginning with Massacre Worm. Now, this guy, 6/5, enters the battlefield, wipes everybody's little board. If they've got a bunch of creatures on the board that are 2 power or 2 toughness-ish, this will kill all of them by giving them -2/-2. And if a creature an opponent controls dies, that player will lose 2 life. Now, of course, Savra is already making people lose creatures left, right, and center, so the Massacre Worm, if not answered, will just kill all of the other players. And if he's on the board in the middle of a board wipe, he will see every other creature die, which will burn everybody probably to death, so people have to deal with him very specifically. But we also have a couple of other board wipes, and these ones specifically deal with stuff that our deck probably would normally have a problem with. Well, you'll notice that I really have a penchant for cards that can blow up any kind of cards so that whatever my opponents are dealing with, I can manage it. But this is a Gaze of Granite. Destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less. We're a green deck. We can pay for that X easily. Pernicious Deed also has an X cost. We can pay it for 3 mana, pop it on the board, and sack it to blow up every artifact, creature, and enchantment with converted mana cost X or less. Pernicious Deed is better and worse than Gaze of Granite in a lot of ways. Better in that it is a permanent and synergizes more with permanent synergies, and we can pay 3 mana for it early and then hold onto it for multiple turns. It's a card that Lightning Rod's removal, but unlike Gaze of Granite, it cannot kill Planeswalkers. So it is a little more flexible in its execution, but the types of cards it can kill are a little more restrictive. But it is still a fantastic board wipe we have access to in our colors. I like the ability, because Savra can already deal with creatures, I don't want to use a bunch of creature board wipes. I want to use board wipes that can get rid of things that Savra can't deal with on her own. And Pernicious Deed and Gaze of Granite do a wonderful job of that. But that leads us into the lands section. We, of course, have 6 forests and 5 swamps, the COVID lands, as I mentioned in my Sephiroth video. And then in the dual land section, we have Command Tower, Darkboar Pathway, Deathcat Glade, Golgari Rot Farm, which can bounce our utility lands to our hand, like Bajuka Bog, Nurturing Peatland, which can sacrifice itself to draw a card, Necroblossom Snarl, Land of War Wastes, Haunted Mire, which is a searchable dual land, Overgrown Tomb, searchable as well. Tainted Wood, if you have a swamp, it is both lands. Twilight Mire, and then Underground Mortuary. ETBs tapped, but we get to surveil 1 when we play it. Woodland Chasm, Swamp Forest. Woodland Cemetery, it is both land types, so long as we can get into play on tap. And Undergrowth Stadium, a Battle Bond land in our colors, with 2 fetching lands being Myriad Landscape and Verdant Catacombs, and then 5 utility lands. Reliquary Tower for our hand size, High Market as a secondary sack outlet, Grim Backwoods as another sack outlet, Bajuka Bog to take care of graveyards, and Westvale Abbey as a way to generate tokens for us to use with our various sack outlets. And more importantly, because we generate as many tokens as we do, Westvale Abbey can just turn into a secondary win con by making Ormondal the Profane Prince. A 9/7 with flying, lifelink, indestructible, and haste is usually pretty hard for most people to answer, so this card can come out and start just pulling you ahead in your games turn by turn. I've had people struggle to answer this guy before, so never sleep on that. But for that was Savra, Queen of the Golgari, my full power build, the deck that I keep physically in my bag with me when I go to tournaments. I adore this deck. I adored making the $15 version of her, and I absolutely love this commander. I love bringing her to tournaments. I love having access to her whenever I'm like, hey guys, do you want to have a fun game of Magic the Gathering where I get to police everybody? It's a hard deck to pull out with friends sometimes, but it is a fun deck. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and let me know what full power deck you want me to build next, or show you if it's one that I already have in physical. Let me know down there. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, everyone, thank you for watching, and insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitta, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.